Okay.
Continue. Right.
All right. So to start with, would you like to say your name and where you are?
My name is Walter Arnold, and I'm at home. And this is in Helsinki, Finland.
Okay. And the first question for you is, who are you as a human being? And that can be whatever kind of answer comes up for you. Your passions, qualities about yourself, whatever you'd like to share, maybe some of your values.
Right. As this is about the humans of Gestalt, and I hope to be not too human, I don't always agree with humanism and prefer to frame Gestalt therapy more than a humanistic therapy, more of as a phenomenological existential therapy, or actually what I personally don't like about the human is the over anthropocentric focus of us being on this planet Earth, trying to dictate whoever else is not human. So I am now the person talking to you, being interviewed. I'm sometimes a father, sometimes a husband, sometimes I'm a grandfather, sometimes I'm a hiker, sometimes I walk, sometimes I work. I like to have a wide range in the way I perceive myself and hope that other people perceive me. I always played on the idea that I would have rather gone to a multiversity than to a university. So to tell you more about myself, maybe I think that I'm a story, or I'm also a story. I like the way Carl Gustav Jung, in one of his last interviews, said that we are of ages. We are not of the moment. So previous to us, I had parents, right? I had parents, great parents in many ways, not perfect. I like the fact, for instance, that when they got married in the 40s, they didn't get married in church. I might get back to the reason why. They were from opposite backgrounds. My mother, and I grew up in Switzerland, the Alps. She was a gatherer, part-time, sometimes full-time. She was from a very poor family in the mountains. She had, as a young girl, to pick berries, all sorts, flowers, and mushrooms in order to support the family, particularly since her parents separated. She had two smaller sisters. And the background of her family being poor was contrasted by my father being, at the time he grew up, an upper class guy. They had inherited an international bookstore, which his father tried to run, but it fell apart during World War II. And this is a bookstore which actually had some interesting people visiting it. People like Hermann Hesse, Rainer Maria Rilke. And Lenin did not visit it, but he wrote while he was in Switzerland, he wrote asking my great-grandfather if he wanted to order the Spark magazine, which he was issuing while living in Switzerland at the time. I questioned my grandfather. He said, no, I don't think I've never seen any records that great-grandfather ordered such a magazine. I have a letter still from Lenin's close person who did write this letter. Okay, my parents were from that kind of background. So I always had the chance to see the simple to the complicated, to the, say, extremely overeducated or hardcore upbringing to the countryside or mountain side kind of upbringing. I think I did appreciate that much more than some of my friends thought. I, growing up, also, of course, my grandparents, because of the background of that library, was very, very much a source of different inputs in my life. I liked them very much. Uncle Fritz was a special guy. That was my father's youngest brother. He might have had a word in a way. I mean, he didn't know about Gestalt therapy, but later on I thought that one extra reason maybe why I picked Gestalt therapy, because it was Uncle Fritz. It was not his job to be a philosopher, but beside rescuing me from my father's grip when I was misbehaving at Christmas festivities or birthdays, he would really defend me, and I found him very much of a devil's advocate for justice. I appreciate it. He also, early in my childhood, kept telling me every now and then that to be or not to be, it's not a problem, it's a fact. And that was partly leading some of my background philosophy growing up as a kid. We talked a lot with my cousin, and because Uncle Fritz separated, my cousins don't have a good picture of the father and are a bit envious that I had such a good relationship with Uncle Fritz. He was in some way more of a touching person than my father, and I could sense that my father was envious, almost jealous. Okay, so that's about me and we being of ages. So the story evolved so that I was growing up in the mountains, and the fact that I never liked school made me value very much summers, the long summers. We had 3 months vacation summer. There was an island in a river with a creek, which had trouts in it. And I set up for quite a few years my teepee in the beginning of summer. A teepee I had received as a present. And with my friends, we'd go there and play cowboys and Indians, practice the art of impalement, throwing little knives, and you throw little knives, holding them by the blade. Mm-hmm. And then we'd be fishing and watching out for some vipers. That was part of the deal. And we had, of course, set up the teepee in this island, but we had actually to cross a bit of the river to get to the island. There was no bridge there. It was a little island. The size maybe of, how you say, half of a football field, maybe. Okay. Well, living in that context then got me more interested into the art of impalement. I stayed for a year, $35 for buying a long throwing knife. That was a catastrophe. It failed because a 10-year-old kid, even a 12-year-old kid, cannot throw a knife of that size. And at the time, I didn't know that big knives are thrown by holding it by the handle. So it ended up not to be a successful experience. Having craved for this big knife, which I went always to look into the store and saved my money, and got a lot of scoldings because it was a dangerous knife, of course, according to my parents and according to a lot of people. Okay, well, in that village also, what with friends we were really after was every now and then, besides jumping from one roof of a house across the alley to the other roof of the house, which was, like very dangerous. We were free to roam around the whole village. We were kings of the village. Like in a village, you don't have limitations. In town, you're told where not to go, where to go with. And yes, we were crows because inhabitants of that village, they were all crows by tradition. Different villages had different names for the people, inhabitants of each village. And our village was the village of crows. So I was a crow from scratch. In the backyard of one of the oldest guy who was the most eloquent person in his way of telling stories, and also one of the most successful hunters, he had a big owl, this size of an owl, in his backyard. He would go hunting with it. When he wouldn't be hunting, he kept it in a cage, and we would go and stare at his owl. And I don't know if you've been very close to a big owl, but it's got big eyes, and his head turns 360 degrees around. So it was driving us nuts. It was like an enchanting experience. And of course, remember, we were crows, and here was an owl. So we had to be careful about it, but we could not, of course, open the cage. We might have managed, but it was locked, you know. So this was part of the learnings in my childhood, which never happened in school. I hated school. I mean, I almost hated school all the way through, even before it became a therapist in university, my university years. I never liked going to class. So most of my life experience and the growing happened outside classes throughout my life up so far. And I like to think of that. It's a warming experience. And on the other hand, of course, it made me think how much time I've wasted, or maybe for the exception of few teachers, I never thought that teachers were that, I don't know, enchanting or good teachers. A few, just a few, which I respected. Well, that was part of my growing up. Then around age 11, two things happened during that year. I got kicked in my belly by an old guy at school. And the next Saturday, my father had signed me up for judo training, which I practiced thoroughly. I became a judo champion in my category. I was really disappointed that I was not allowed to reach the black belt, because at 17, at that stage in history, they weren't allowing that young people to become black belt. So eventually I quit it. I practiced also some kendo and aikido, but judo was really the only sport I did compete in. The other thing which I was exposed at age 11 is yoga. I had been going over my friend's home, and her mother would be standing upside down on her head reading a book. And I said, "What's your mother doing?" "She's doing her yoga." Wow. It wasn't long, a few days, I collected literature and was reading, very excited. I was practicing every day, trying to put myself in a lotus posture and doing all those sort of crazy, primarily hatha yoga. And that was, considering that I was a quite introverted guy, that there was like, I don't know, could have been a substitute for therapy, but nobody talked about therapy to an 11-year-old guy in 1961. Can you imagine?
I think they call it self-regulation, right?
Right. Or self-torture, or what else, I don't know. So none of my school friends had ever heard of it. And not many had heard of judo. It was just about to begin to be popular. So I was a bit weird in those things with respect to the circle of friends around. Well, that brought about, first of all, that at my own home, my parents threw out the years from when I was 11 to when I left, about 17 years of age, I was called Gandhi. They called me Gandhi. In a duo way, like a bit of a tease. Of course, Gandhi had died in 48. I was born in 1950. That followed the news. They knew who Gandhi is. I mean, adult people knew it, although they might not have known about the Gandhi's nonviolence philosophy and that kind of stuff. But I was skinny and practicing my yoga, and Gandhi was sitting in his cross-leg posture most of the time when being interviewed even. So I was Gandhi, and sometimes I liked it, sometimes I didn't. But it was very useful for me to be introduced to the disciplines of Asian descent, because with yoga and judo, I was very tuned in into knowing what focusing is. That's awareness, right? So eventually, there was something very attractive and something very useful to me about that, that I got into these two disciplines, except for when hitting the soccer field with the kids on the block. I was asked to fight with a bigger guy, demonstrating my capacities, because none had attended judo lessons, but of course, kids are interested in fighting and punching. Mm-hmm. I refused, also because my judo teacher said, you don't practice that on the street, you don't practice that, but in the practicing judo quarters. So the older guy in the group led all the kids to chase me. I had to really get myself going. And I was a fast guy, luckily. They stoned me out of the place.
Wow.
I ran through forests, got back home. I think I never said a word to my parents. I was so ashamed. I never went back, of course. I kind of figured out that I am living in my own way, which is too different from the way a lot of the kids on the block were thinking, especially in those days, 61, right? Or that was a couple of years later. That was in 64, I think. So I never went back, and I followed my way. The yoga experience, practice helped me in saving my life. When at age 17, after starting high school, I went out with a friend who was also practicing judo with me. He was 2 years older. We went out on a lake in winter. It was the first time we thought maybe we can compete. We had these competing boats, these very thin, long boats, and I had my own row and he had the other row. So it was not a double, it was a what you call, I think, a two, because each one has one row on one side of the boat. And the weather was okay. It turned to be into a storm. The waves were like, overwhelming. They were about 3 feet high after a while. So we found ourselves in the water, but being at that age and panicking a bit, we didn't remember that the boat never really sinks. It just stays below the surface of water. Well, my friend panicked. He started swimming. I couldn't see him because of the waves. And I don't know if you know, but those competing devices have, you put the shoes laced to the bottom because there is a rolling stool on which you move to row. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't free myself from those laces. So I stayed, I don't know, was it 10, 15 seconds longer with water about this high before somehow I pulled my feet out of the shoes, started swimming toward the shore. Nobody was around by the shore. We were about 400 yards, 400 meters. What's that? 1,000 feet? Not sure. from the shore. The water in February was about 5 degrees, very cold. I thought it was a swimming head. Everything else was. I succeeded in taking the bottom of my sweatsuit off. Couldn't take the top off. And when I got about, I don't know, 150 feet from the shore, there was a motorbike policeman had noticed me and asked me if he would have to come in and help me. I said, no, but look at my friend, he's still screaming for help. In a while, I was in an ambulance. They took me to the hospital. I was under blankets for 3 hours, and then I was released, went back home. For a week, every day after, I was every now and then with the rescue team trying to locate where the thing actually happened. You know, the location was not that precise because I was having to do with the having to swim myself out of the situation. What helped me is that because I was practicing yoga, I had great capacity for focusing, and I imagined a sadhu. I don't know if you know what a sadhu is. One of these holy men rambling around northern India, holy people in lotus posture, powerful eyesight, and I grabbed this image, and that kept me focused on, I need to swim now. I'm swallowing water every now and then, but I'm swimming. I'm going forward. I can't help my friend. I had gone through a rescue training a year before, but I was taught that in certain situations, you really got to be clear about, are you going to be able to do anything about it? In that situation, I barely made it myself. After a week, the local rescue team hadn't found my friend. The previous summer, I had met a beautiful girl, age 20. She was a champion in diving, European champion in diving. With her team, they came from the next town, and they found him about 45 meters deep. He still had tennis shoes and the full sweatsuit on. I didn't see, I was not on. And the funeral, well, missed the element which I thought later would have been important for me to see him, but they didn't allow me to see him. They closed the coffin before I got there. The parents had already buried their first son at age 12 because he had leukemia. Dad at house looking on the lake. It was devastating for them. And for me, it was like a very anxious time in my life. And I remember working with Jim Simkin in Big Sur. He thought I was still blocked by some of the elements of that experience. The fact that I made it, the newspapers were like praising how brave I was, and I thought, forget about it. My friend is gone. Well, it was a few months later that I went to US to finish my high school. I had a scholarship, and my US experience, I finished my high school there, got my high school diploma. And in 67, 68, nobody had heard of yoga unless it was California. So, or some parts of California, maybe San Francisco, I don't know. So I was elected yoga teacher. And I had a class, spare time, not as a curriculum of the high school, but I had 90 students twice a week following my yoga lessons. And that was fun. I enjoyed that a lot. What I didn't enjoy was that I was put into a very strict host family who was Southern Baptist. and we couldn't get along. There was no way we could get along. They got rid of me by Christmas. The organization found another family, which was fabulous in many ways. My roommate, the guy who had the same age, was a very popular football player, a top football player, which eventually ended up playing for Baylor Bear, a top university in the United States with a top football team. He was great. He was great. They were Methodists. They weren't pushing. I was able to breathe. What was I was not able to breathe was the, let's say, it was the atmosphere, but the fact that they, though we had great discussions, they were very intellectual. But the mother had a beer problem and a smoking problem. So when I would get up in the morning, the whole house was smoky and smelled of beer. Very friendly person, but to a 17-year-old, that was something I was not used to. And the talks were great. Sometimes also because of the brother of Eddie Hamlin was my friend. His brother was an accepted member of the Black Panther movement. So we had great discussions, but there was a thickness in that, seeing this smart, good woman dismantling herself in a way which already, from my senses, I couldn't take the smoke and the beer stench in the morning. Particularly. One day in the morning, I remember fainted. I don't know what was, but could have been too much smoke in the air when I got up. I don't know. Eddie was a top brother, really, for me. He was dating L.H. Hunt's daughter. I don't know if you know who L.H. was. He was one of the richest men in the world. And so we were invited many times at this completely different living style in that almost like Capitol-like building. I never saw the old man, but the daughter welcomed us several times. There was something about me being exposed to different strategies of American society, which made my experience anyway very rich, although I was, a couple of times gently pushed on the side. Please go on. You're not accepting our families. And it was true. It was both ways. So I ended up, before the school years ended, in the house of a really wealthy art dealer who had Henry Moore's sculptures in the yard, Kandinsky and Paul Klee in a living room the size of a half of a gym.
Wow.
Yes. And her husband was an architect designing skyscrapers in New York. Particularly, she was a great person in making my closing up of being in US, an experience of getting acquainted with the different stratas of American society. She helped me move on after the school year to San Fernando Valley, in a place called Thousand Oaks, where I had a great beginning of the summer vacation before returning to Europe. During that year, I briefly saw a documentary on TV stating that there was this man, and then they showed the man by the pool at Esalen Institute in Big Sur, explaining a few things about Gestalt therapy. And I said, well, I'm a guy who's learned yoga at age 11, these things sound very familiar, make sense to me. So I booked up for a Gestalt group for the year, which was attended about once a week. Primarily hot seat, empty chair techniques. It was very new to me, but it made sense to me. After that, it took me 5-7 years before I got back to therapy.
So that was when you were
during
Gestalt therapy where?
67, this was in big D little A double L A S,
Mhm.
Dallas, Texas.
Mhm.
And returning to Europe, we students took a boat. There were 700 students on a boat crossing the Atlantic in 10 days, a party, big party. But there was a time after a school year to be on such a party boat. Got back to Europe, I got another scholarship to an international college where I started studying granite sculpture, filmmaking, calculus, and literature.
Interesting combination.
A combination, yes, of that. It was very free. I just wanted, and that gave me an A degree, associate of art degree. During that period, also in the area in Switzerland, there was a well-known professor in his old age by the name of Max Horkheimer, who had founded the Frankfurt am Main School of Critical Thinking, along with Adorno, from Marcuse, which was read by us in the philosophy classes, and Pollock, which mostly, I think, acted in US later on. So this school of thinking was primarily founded in order to, try to understand all the backgrounds in European philosophy, social philosophy, in order to see how to overcome contradictions. Max Horkheimer's one of the books which I got first into reading was The Eclipse of Reason. And with Adorno, he wrote The Dialectic of Enlightenment. Very interesting discussion I had with this old man. And was just walking distance from my home, from the university. Well, then moved to Finland when I was 20. I wanted to get away from basic Central Europe. I didn't want to go across the oceans. And I had been traveling extensively during summer times, worked in the USSR in the Caucasus for a summer, and hitchhiked through Finland, which I started liking, and continued my studies at the university here in philosophy, psychology, social psychology, sociology. Eventually majored in philosophy and psychology. I had the privilege of having really professors with really strong background. One had a strong background in Gestalt psychology. He was a perception psychology professor, Kai von Fiant. And the one in the Department of Philosophy was a member of the Academy of Finland. He was the successor professor at Cambridge University in England after Wittgenstein quit. He stayed for a year. Then, because he had inherited the rights to edit Ludwig Wittgenstein's writings, he came back to his own country and acted here. A wonderful person, probably one of the only really big teachers which I have full respect of. Old-fashioned man, modern at the same time, friendly and joyful, and wrote about European culture and other. He was an analytic philosopher. He was not an existential philosopher. Um, okay. So after I got my BA, this is the next story. With my girlfriend, we took a year off. I'd spared money by working as a stevedore at the local harbor here in Helsinki. So we took off overland, traveling through Europe, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Middle Age sort of environments, and Pakistan, and spent most of the time in India because it was such a big country to visit. I got very sick, intestinal issues and amoebas, which are very dangerous. I was weighing 49 kilos. I don't know how much that is in pounds, but I'm 6 feet and that's very little.
Yeah, that's less than I weigh, and I'm 5'2".
Okay, right. So I got very sick, and at the end of the trip, when I little recovered after staying in one spot for a month to recover from amoebiasis and also hepatitis, I had all possible imaginable things, and I recovered within the month. My weight didn't go up much, but I recovered enough to do the Everest Trail in Nepal up to almost 20,000 feet high. And that was an adventure I wouldn't advise to anybody, because we started out with beautiful weather from one spot where we had spent the night for a day trip up almost to 20,000. It's a semi-tropical climate, warm, hot, really hot in the summertime during daytime, but all of a sudden a snowstorm came. We were in troubles because the path was covered with snow. We had to figure out how to get back lower down. My wife was scared and just trusted that I would sort myself out and she would just follow me. So I started with no mountaineering shoes. I had basic leather boots on. I started feeling the evenness of the path, trying to balance myself along it by almost crawling with the bottom of the sole of my feet along it. And after 10 minutes, I saw a young Nepali Sherpa girl coming up in the snowstorm with tennis shoes on. Or at least I thought I saw her. To this day, I don't know if it was an hallucination or wishful thinking. What I know is that after a moment, I said, wow, and my sister, why didn't I ask her to help me out of here? As I'm telling you, I don't know if I really saw this person or not. There was a Swedish guy in a little tent which served as tea up high there. And nearby there was a Sherpa, which was his Sherpa, his guide. So I thought she's going up to her boyfriend, the guide. But I really don't know why I didn't stop. Maybe because it was an hallucination. I can't tell you. I was so focused on getting myself and my girlfriend back. Very scary experience. I don't advise anybody in semi-tropic climates at such altitudes to go out without a guide. So another story from which I learned, we're further back to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. We were at the end of the year. We've been gone for a year, spending $1 a day for sleeping over in a hostel or whatever was the night place offered, and one day $1 per day in food. So we lasted a long time, but we ran out of money. So we started our trip back to Europe. I saw a double-decker, which was advertising a trip to London for some $80 per person. Well, that was attractive enough. I went up to the place advertised it where you can buy the ticket. There's a British guy. He had bought this double-decker from another British guy who thought to make a business in in India first, and then in Nepal. But a double decker is too high. The line, the electricity line are too low in those countries. You can't get a double decker under. So this guy thought, well, I'm going to bring back the double decker to Europe. I'm going to make some business by selling tickets to these young hippies in
So you
those
got
days.
on a double-decker hippie bus from Nepal to London.
That was the intention. Wait a minute.
Okay.
This guy had previously driven a normal bus in India, but was late to cross a border. And so the Indian government confiscated his bus. So while we took off from Kathmandu, about 20 of us, he was driving. The upper deck was full with new mattresses where we could go and take naps and sleep, well arranged. But along the way, he had some businesses to do. Among others, selling a big owl he had. Getting the bus out from the Indian customs, which didn't succeed, we got in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. I was counting my few dollars. I was, after a quick decision, I went up to his hotel asking for reimbursement. I said, I have no money. I need to quickly get back on public transportation to get there. I will not have any money to buy bread. And he had me thrown out by the hotel manager.
Oh.
I saw him 3 hours later downtown Kabul in the main street. What happened is that I probably started grabbing him, kicking him, punching him. He did the same. We went on for quite a while. There was a crowd of, I don't know, 50, 100 people around us. And we were really punching and kicking. In a second, I don't know what dictated that second, but we were really close, looking at each other's eyes. And after a moment, we turned our back to each other. We started walking opposite directions. That wasn't one of the wisest things I ever done in a third world country. We could have been put to jail and they would have tried to get money out of us. Some punishment. Well, a few hours later, I went up to his hotel. He gave money back. And with my girlfriend, we took local transportation and headed on to Europe. And the bus, of course, I don't know how long it took to get to London to Europe because this guy was having it pleasantly along his own time schedule. Well, back in Finland, I continued my study, and then with my girlfriend, got married. We got 2 kids. We stayed together for 14 years. Then I divorced, and the divorce time, or after the divorce time, I took off for a summer in Japan, where I was going to study Butoh, which is a post-avant-garde dance. I had practiced modern dance here in Finland for quite a few years. And I was interested in this Japanese Butoh dance, a post-avant-garde dance, which started out by Japanese going to New York, learning from Martha Graham modern dance, and she would go to Japan. But after a while, they figure out she has a long nose, she has long fingers, long arms, long legs. We are none of that. We're going to do our own thing. That doesn't fit us. So in the early 50s, they started their own modern dance, post-avant-garde dance called Butoh. And I was there and performing with this Japanese dance team, touring Japan, doing performances in rivers, in waterfalls, different environments. It was not primarily a stage thing. Yes, we had a practicing quarter downtown Tokyo, true, but our main quarters was in Shinjuku-shi, which was in the outskirts of Tokyo. And came back to Europe remarried after a while, after a year, got 2 kids again. And from some perspective, I would say it's been kind of a well-handled divorce and remarrying, because both my wife and my kids are really, we're doing a lot of things together. We even travel together sometimes. And then the other meaningful story connected with my interests and who I am, around age 10, my son was serious about tennis. So I trained myself, not myself, but someone trained me as a coach. I became a coach to make it cheaper because I wouldn't have been able to afford a thorough training. And I told him, listen, I promise to you that we'll try out your limits and my limits. But we got to be on tennis courts before brushing our teeth. And we did that for some years. Later on, we went after 10 o'clock in the evening, because the course, if you get early or late, they're cheaper. We did that for almost 10 years, or almost. And he eventually got offered 15 scholarships for going into American universities. I was suffering from cancer at the time. I was unable to make a decision which university. I paid an agent, which blew it. He was there for a year instead of 4. The tennis coach was a disaster. The school curriculum was ridiculous. He came back after a year. Well, also, partly he was happy because he had met a girlfriend just a few weeks before going to US. So he was okay with it, gave up tennis. A few weeks before leaving US, he got into not a street fight like it did in Kabul, but he was attacked from behind. But because he was well trained, he was able to shake the guy off and knock him on the ground and walk back to campus from walking from the gas station to the campus. You know, a lot of Europeans don't know that you don't really walk on sidewalks in the United States in certain places. It's not like Europe. So he learned from that, but luckily he managed. Okay, so 4 kids.
You mentioned cancer.
Yeah, I mentioned cancer. That could be a different interview, but it was bearable. Bearable because it was not painful. And actually, I focused on a long project. I've been in the past year into a project which I partly finished 5 years ago, translating a 700 pages long epic, which is called the Kalevala, which has poems up to 3,000 years old. I had to learn archaic Finnish as well. And I published it, published it some 5 years ago. And last month, guess what? I came out with my CD. I read the whole thing, almost 25 hours.
Wow.
Especially for old people who can't read it.
Congratulations.
So very, very satisfied, especially also some old people in the valley where I grew up were really satisfied. I'm gonna open the discussion in about 2 months when I'll be in Switzerland for the summer.
An epic seems fitting. Seems like you've had a bit of an epic coming to be how you are right now and who you are.
Yes, it's you know, it's the you know, in a couple of books, paperbacks by Pearls, you read on the back, to suffer one's death and to be reborn is not easy. I think we need this death rebirth. We go through on a daily basis with that kind of thing, which was very much exposed by Otto Rank. A lot of Gestalt people know about the Rank connection because he had read the creativity in Gestalt therapy, which partly was by Otto Rank in the art and the artist in his book analysis of what is creativity and what is to be an artist. But a lot of people don't know that Otto Rank wrote The Trauma of Birth. So he was actually one of the original perinatal trauma possibility visionary, which later was taken up by Stan Groff, someone who worked at Esalen, and to which I participated in his teachings, also asked him to come to Finland. This oceanic kind of being with a cup of tea or being in a womb, and then the contraction starts. Kind of like a storm, you don't know where to go, but eventually when the womb opens, you have a light at the end of the tunnel, and the struggle becomes a little more meaningful after the chaotic no exit situation. Then you get out, you're born, you still have an existential crisis maybe after that. But we go through every day, maybe in small or minor death rebirth processes, and this map about the perinatal 4 stages has helped me a lot, and my clients and me in kind of locating where things are with me and with my clients.
Makes sense. So I am curious, as I go back to some of the questions that we often use in these interviews, in this moving through the world in different times,
yes,
how have you come to understand yourself? I mean, some of these may be interesting for you and some may not, but either as a man, in gender terms, or in terms of privilege. I mean, how have you come to understand yourself in those different parts of your identity?
I wrote a book on identity, but from the point of view of cultural shaming and language shaming aspects in society where mother tongues are not allowed and more powerful language overtake minority languages. So that topic is interesting to me.
I was curious how many languages you were navigating in that story, by the way.
Well, I've written about 3 books in 3 different languages, but and I speak a few languages, maybe 5, maybe 8, depending on the level of the discussion. I studied Sanskrit when I started university here in Helsinki, but it turned out to be too demanding because I was learning Finnish, which is a non-European language, by the way. So yes, gender. Gender to me is secondary because I like to see my clients, myself, as a being rather than restricting myself to the dimension of being a man. Plus, maybe if you think of a macho man is not necessarily what I associate with. I pretty much am at ease with all clients of mine, friends, be them transgender, lesbian, homosexuals, and actually, strange enough, I have quite a few female lesbian clients, which is curious, like the connection with what I identify with is so process-oriented that because I see life as a series of metamorphoses, transformations, like, of course, the death rebirth, but it's also kind of like a transformation, a metamorphic approach to life. By the way, I saw once something which tells me how much I appreciate this. In Helsinki 20 years ago, Chaplin's daughter and her daughter gave a performance. She's a circus artist. She came out on stage in 1 hour in 50 different forms. She would go 1/2 a second behind the curtain, come out transformed. How she did that, I don't know. I mean, it was prepared, definitely, well prepared. And after the end of the performance, I think she she got so applauded, she came out with 30 other different forms. So it was appalling. It was awesome. It was like, I was in awe. My eyes were just amazed with all that. So the transforming of, the cocoon, getting into butterfly and all that cycle. Not so much the circle, but the spiral metaphor for growing or for life has been, very much something close to me. I don't know. You have lived in Mexico, I think, and I was very interested in huichol art.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have 2 huichol yarn paintings on my walls here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from the 70s. One was from the 70s. I think one I bought, not in Mexico. I think I bought it in Stockholm. And in some of them, you have the spiral, the shell symbolic form of concentrating ball. So as an exit out of a no exit situation, or something which appears in no exit situation, you've got the exit possibility.
So you mentioned a bit to the topic of power and privilege. You mentioned that in relation to the languages.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd want to say anything more to that about your own.
Well, I want to say
yourself.
that, until a few years ago, it seems that there were still about 10,000 languages in the world, and they are disappearing. What is striking to me is that in places in the world, which we think in the Western world, they are backwards country or primitive, like Papua New Guinea, you have 600 languages and 400 of them are taught in the first 5-year elementary schools. If percentage-wise that would be the same thing in Western countries or other parts of the world, that would be something very, very important. Strange enough, Papua New Guinea has the largest variety of butterflies. You wouldn't want the world to be populated by 2 sorts of butterflies, only yellow and blue butterflies, right?
Mm.
So it is underestimated that speaking a foreign language sometimes has an influence whereby some minority people in one country might not even get involved in politics because that demands being really able to manage a language to a certain level.
It's exclusionary, yeah.
Right. I'm interested in language landscapes. In some countries which are bilingual, some of the signs are only in one language. In Ireland, Finland, there are in 2 languages. In Finland, it's in Swedish and Finnish. But that's not the same thing in every country where you have more than one language. Were you more specific about something of that interest of yours? Is that
no? I'm curious, just noticing sort of the dynamics of yourself in the world as you move through it in terms of.
Well, I've always been part of a minority language. Mm-hmm. Always. My first wife was Finnish speaking, so 2 of my kids are primarily Finnish speaking. My later kids are Swedish speaking, so my second wife is Swedish speaking, which is a minority here. So I started out from a minority language, going to a foreign country where I was a minority, moved to another country where I was a minority. So I had to work out language-wise my capacities to identify deeply enough with the language to be able to even translate a poem, mm-hmm. which 99% of the people here in Finland at school hate it because it's so difficult.
It's not easy. It's not. So what about, speaking about where you are now in terms of age? Like how are you feeling? How are you appreciating this point in the metaphors, the metamorphosis? I can't even speak.
I'm in,
The
I'm in a good stage. My body could be even in better shape. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I
Mhm,
walk to work. It's about a 40-minute walk, and I walk back. Sometimes I play tennis.
mhm,
So I like to hike. I can walk for 8 hours. I cannot
mhm,
run or have uh, a polyneuropathy whereby the bottom of my feet are a bit deteriorated, so I cannot run, except for I can run after a tennis ball. But my wife says if you could call after the ball bounces once, it'd be nice. Sometimes you get the ball when it bounces 3 times.
mhm,
But otherwise, I can walk long ways.
mhm,
Um, um, this was about my age. Uh, Spiritually, mentally, I'm satisfied, really, um, and I can do practical everything better than 10 years ago when I had cancer,
mhm,
right? So it kind of like a reborn.
mhm. And do you have any thoughts about what might be coming in the remaining part of your life?
What am I becoming? Okay, I have grandkids that they're going to crawl more and more. I only have 3 by now because I started late. My first kid I got when I was 30, and my daughter, she's 42. She started almost age 40,
Mhm.
creating 2 kids, and my other son, who's 26, just started last year to give me a grandkid. Um, well, I'm supporting my students who have continued the teachings and have introduced it to the university because since a few years, if you don't integrate your Gestalt training in the university, it's not going to be refundable, the work of the therapists by the national
Oh,
insurance.
okay.
So we've always been in good terms with the national insurance. They've been refunded, but a few years ago they made it stricter. They said now you need to comply to our demands, and we need you to reframe the training. And we do the screening of the students, and we participate in eventually in evaluating the finals and that kind of stuff. So I'm
Mm.
supporting my students in this project. I promised to do more of that
Mm.
with
So that's
supervising and that kind of stuff.
mhm. So
Yes.
that's almost jumping ahead to, what you're doing in the Gestalt way and what you're going to be doing there. So there was this
Well, that was not
guy in
personalized and
this.
personal.
No, 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 I know. But there was the whole encounter with Gestalt. But can you help me fill in that blank? What has been your experience or your life in Gestalt?
Okay. I told you about my experience in the Gestalt group in 67, 68.
Mhm,
Then, and previous to that, I had no idea what therapy was. I had read the same year, I read Frankel's logotherapy. That was
mhm,
the only. But then after the mid 70s, I was in the Pulsar's training in Southern California. I was in Jim Simpkins training in Big Sur. You know,
mhm.
you heard Jim, of course, yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then later I was in the LA training.
Mm,
And I was inviting a lot of the people who participated in their training. And these people were coming to Finland to train my students. So I was exposed to Lichtenberg and Crocker, Zinker, and well, you name all these people which have been at major Gestalt um, conferences, particularly in US in the old days.
mhm,
Now they've extended. I was the founder of the AAGT way back
mm,
with Jack Negerman. Uh, and now that became the present International Association for the Advanced Gestalt. I was a co-founder of the IGTA, right? International Gestalt
yes.
Therapy Association.
Okay.
Uh, Jontev was chairman after he was not anymore in the board. I was the chairman and president as well. We were struggling. We had issued a journal of which I was the promoter or leading the actually the gestalting of the journal. But then the sponsor dropped out because I took a lawyer to figure out whether we were legally existing, and it turned out that the state of Maine had no clue that we were a member of the board. So the thing fell apart.
Mhm. So what has Gestalt been for you? What have you found in it, or why do you orient around it?
Right. As I told you, evolving from a world of focusing and concentrating like the world of yoga was, the transferring on to the idea of awareness and awareness continuum was really a metamorphosis which fitted my early teenage years. And it was, in a way, like Pearl said, like, it felt like it's as old as the world. And to me, primarily, I think it was a way to, like I learned from participating in Esalen at Gregory Beta's seminars, it was a way to look for patterns which connect different elements of what it is to be a human being, primarily myself and others and clients. And particularly, I thought the Gestalt approach was smart, or at least smart enough to give me some clues to sort out the complexity of what it is to be a human. So sorting out the complexity of life, primarily, I would say life, because there was a time when I almost wiped out completely the word self to as an experience, because at the very end, I think that the word self, etymologically, if you go into it, it actually means life. So if I say myself, I can substitute and say my life. I'm more connected to the way Gestalt perceives the organism in the environment. With the
And is that more of life as a process versus self as an object?
Not only that, but it's more of a relational thing, because myself seems to be too humanistic or too anthropocentric, while my life includes, right now, it includes you, people we talk about. So talking about life doesn't exclude me. I would have liked maybe to have this interview with a pat in my lap, but maybe it wouldn't have suited the situation, or might have scared some people out.
Do you mean the 36-year-old python that's over there?
Right. Exactly. So I tried to be kind enough to not to make so that some people pull away.
So Gestalt in particular, how would you say it has affected you as a person? What has it brought, or what has it given? I mean, you said it is like a way to see the complex patterns in the system.
Yeah, patterns, the complexity. Of course, Gestalt is a German word. The Finnish language also has the same word, and English doesn't. But Gestalt is relation by definition. You don't have to advertise relational Gestalt therapy, because, focusing and getting away from focusing from one thing to the other means like relating according to the situation, to the environment. So it has taught me to be better orchestrated with my feelings my mind, my body, appreciating all of the aspect of who I am, who my clients are, who my family members, other people, democratically.
Mhm.
At different times, I might choose thinking instead of my body or my feeling, of course, but being enough orchestrated to be able to balance that.
Mhm.
If you see that relation, like, and also particularly that getting rid of the over anthropocentric humanistic aspect of um, academic life, or thinking about humanism as the uh, great thing. We forget that right now humans are having a war in Ukraine, and not only Ukraine, other places. So, so it's good to be reminded that we need to really think about the limitations of being human and the respect for environment. I'm married to an environmental engineer. She's working with technical solution for waste management and water management in the largest research center in Finland, State Research Center. So I've been exposed daily in the last 36 years. That's how long our marriage has lasted now, up so far, about all this environmental technology she's talking and lecturing. She's right now in Capri, southern Italy, at the conference, talking about these things, connecting different nations, providing some finished solutions and getting new ideas from other countries for ecological purposes. So, yeah, the eco psychology, if you want to say, not ego psychology.
Mhm. And what would you say has been your experience of Gestalt community? Because a lot of people, does that phrase even make sense to you? I mean, some people see
Well,
it as an academic niche. Some people see it as, lifestyles.
It is a, I like when I go to conferences. The last conference was when I saw you in Monterey. I used to go more often. I like to see people again. I like people. I mean, I do my work. I like people. I need to be enough enchanted about people. I'm curious about people and what happens in therapy sessions, in life, at a cafe, at a restaurant, down the street, in the woods, everywhere, on top of the mountain, in a meeting. But I'm not cultish about Gestalt.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoy being in this environment. But sometimes if it gets cultish, then I have a sense that just like I don't want to sign up for any religions or ism.
Mm-hmm.
I studied all sorts of philosophy, but never was involved in any strict political or religious sect of any sort. So I like to deal with all sorts of colors of people or colors of butterflies. I enhance diversion, and if the number of butterflies species could increase, I would be even happier.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think just getting to know you a little bit, the depth of your, I don't know, being resourced
Yeah.
would probably at this point make it very difficult to find one thing and fit into one box.
Right. Still, I've been focusing on tennis, on language translating. It's a 20-year-old project. Mm-hmm. I've been focused on, like writing about the philosophy of language and the philosophy of a mother tongue. But at the same time, I don't have time to be very active in certain things. My wife is, through her work primarily, but I pay every month my fees to Greenpeace and to Amnesty International since years, since ages. And I can be demonstrating my ideas, like down the yard. Once I drove my car on the lawn because they were trying to dig a ditch there to put in the middle of the lawn a light. Someone thought it needs to be a light in the middle where my kids were playing soccer.
Oh.
So I parked my car there to prevent them to dig the ditch there. And then we had a pretty hot meeting after that, a few days
And
after.
is there a light there or no?
The light was confined to the margin of the garden.
So what am I missing? What else? You know, it's one of those situations where the questions are smaller than the subject. So
We're talking about life, not just myself, as I told you. I consider myself as a story, and also life is what I'm about. I hope to be lively enough in my mind, heart, and spirit and body as long as I can. With
And
you,
so-
with other people, with a certain warmth, because I like people. I like dogs and cats.
Okay, that sounds good. So what else am I missing? What other part of you would you like to bring in or share with me right now?
I don't know. I like being with kids and their kids, my wife. I like relatives, friends. I like to every now and then to practice the art of idleness. Okay, not laziness, but
Stillness?
contemplation. Huh?
Mhm.
Contemplation.
Stillness? Yeah.
Stillness, you saying?
Yeah.
Then we say, yeah, idleness in the sense of like, not necessarily. Well, previously I did a lot of yoga and was meditating, my legs crossed and things. Nowadays, I have a very limited reminiscence of that. I can do my yoga while on an elevator going to the 6th floor at work. But picking a moment where I get attracted by something, could be the sunset or a spot in nature, someone on the bus, and contemplating without formally setting myself and saying, now it's the time for me to meditate. It's another form of meditation, maybe. Some people would say that, but witnessing in a focused way, getting away from thinking, and I think Aldous Huxley would call it being enhancing the timeless moments. You heard that?
I have not. I'm taking that in.
Well, Huxley's familiar?
Yes, big.
Okay. Yeah.
I like being with people who know things I don't know.
Okay. Aldous Huxley. He wrote The Doors of Perception.
Yeah.
Very interesting book. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
And I'm also busy every now and then. I'm not just idling.
No. It's another thing. But would you say that this is an okay place to stop our conversation for now? I'm sure there are more pieces of you that could come in.
I'm quite satisfied, and I think I want to thank you because you make it possible to so easily come out. I mean, you're professionally an interviewing person, so you're very talented. At least this, I thought it was pleasant too.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I do feel like we're sort of coming to an end, and I don't want to feel like I'm pulling more and asking for more. I'm really appreciating meeting you again, and it's interesting because I do have a very clear memory of being physically in front of you from 2014, and this has been a lovely
2014.
That's when we met.
I've been telling people I was in Monterey 3-4 years ago.
Well, it's been a long 3-4 years.
Wow.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
That's where my perception of time sometime at this age.
It's flexible. That's
very
okay.
flexible, very relaxed.
So I've enjoyed picking up the threads of our being together, and I look forward to doing that again sometime.
Yes, sometimes I hope to see you again.
Well, thank
If you
you.
ever come to Finland, welcome, let me know.
I hope to. I would
Okay.
love to. Probably during the summer months would be.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank
take
you.
care. Thank you very
You
much
too.
to you.